You've got, of course, me, Joe Wagner, Chris Fat Mario Rubio, but joining us today are Adrian Ochoa and Toby Cochran, and they created a beautiful short film that is getting great acclaim. I'm going to let you guys talk a little bit about it because it is a beautiful film and it's got a great story.
Yeah, so Luki the Lights is about a robot character named Luki living his best life until one day he's diagnosed with the disease ALS. And the story follows how Luki lives out the rest of his life on his term. So it's a story about perseverance and a little bit of hope and having that kind of human connection of, you know, what do you do when the cards are stacked up against you and how do you live out life on your terms? This whole idea came from this beautiful couple in the Netherlands, Sasha and Anjo. Anjo was first diagnosed with ALS about 7 years ago. And when he was first diagnosed, Sasha and Anjo had no idea how to explain this disease to their children, both of which were under the age of 10 at the time. And in order to remedy this, Sasha came up with this idea of creating a robot with light bulbs in the joints. That way, the kids could kind of follow along and fill in the light bulbs. As the disease progresses, the light bulbs kind of go out one by one, and they could follow along like, oh, let's fill in the light bulb in the joint, in the wrist joint, as daddy's, hand goes out or elbow goes out, things like that. And it became a little popular in the Netherlands, and in early 2021, they found our company, Big Grin Productions, to help them bring their story to life.
I'm glad we get to dive into all the love and care that went into this amazing project that you guys have brought.
Well, yeah, and hearing your guys' story, how you guys came to be working together and your independent tracks coming together on creating something I think that will drive tons of awareness. So really, really happy to have you guys on. Proud to bring this out to a broader audience and expose people to it, and looking forward to seeing how much awareness this brings to ALS.
And we also get a little story about going to Shaq's crib.
Oh yeah,
and playing some b-ball. You'll have to tune in for that.
Yeah,
Please
enjoy. Yeah, you got a nice setup behind you there, like all of the figurines and whatnot that we grew up with. It's just yours are actually well taken care of, and mine are either gone, burned, or
Classic.
Burned.
I don't know where the hell they are. They're somewhere.
Oh my gosh, dude!
Did you take care of your stuff?
Dude, did I take care of my stuff? Dude, I just can't wait. I need to go into my bins.
Do you still have a box?
They're all in airtight bins. Now, the one thing I didn't do is I don't have many of the still in the package.
Mm-hmm. What did you collect?
Well, I have like all the Marvel, He-Man, G.I. Joe.
You had those like soft wrestle buddies.
Yeah, the wrestle buddies.
Yeah, it was like
everyone got one.
You know what they were, right? They're like sex dolls for children.
No, dude, stop!
Dude, I'm just saying.
No, they weren't, dude.
I never got them. I never got one because my parents had fucking logic.
I was the only child, dude. Okay, and they were my buddies. And there was nothing sexual, okay? There was just wrestling.
Wrestling with a stuffed man on the ground.
I do remember those. It was like Hulk Hogan.
Did you have one?
No.
Okay, you know what?
The Marvel guys too, and G.I. Joes. But there are some things I wish I did keep. Well, kept in better condition, I should say. When Jurassic Park came out, like that became like a big. I don't know how old I was, like 10 or something, and so like that was all I wanted, and so like all my investment went into that, and so it was like all the dinosaurs, and like they were, they could move and whatever else. It was like a new material, it was like latex or whatever that nobody had ever used to make toys.
Oh, latex.
And so
see how he emphasized that over here, calling me weirdo, but he just had to get that new latex.
You had to soap him up.
Using latex is real smooth.
Soap them up.
Go ahead,
Joe. It gets slippery.
So I did keep all these things in bins, and then my kids, as they came of age, I started like giving them to my kids, and my kids did not treat them with the amount of respect that I treated them with, and so one by one they would fall. Even like old Tonka trucks. It's like, damn, those things are worth some money now.
Oh, well, that makes sense. You gave your old toys, like you didn't try to collect them or anything like that. You gave them to your kids.
Even the ones that I collected.
Them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's true love right there, dude.
Yeah.
Actually.
I tried to teach them to appreciate things, and hey, it didn't always work out right.
Well, I'm gonna try to go back and open up my bins and.
Well, let's go ahead and introduce our guests. Well, first of all, welcome to another episode of Go With Your Palate. You got me, Joe Wagner, and my co-host Chris Fat Mario Rubio. Today we got two special guests. We got Toby Cochran.
Hey.
Hello. All right.
He's on Zoom.
And Adrian Ochoa
In studio.
in studio. All right. And they have some talents that we're going to talk about and what they've created. So welcome to the show. I think it's best to start with.
They're doing big things.
They are.
So
Let's hear the origin story. Adrian, how did you get started in this?
Yeah, so let's go way back. As a kid, I loved animation. You know, I was those kids that when we would have the special preview of the Disney Channel, I'd like religiously like watch cartoons like all weekend, and I would like record everything on VHS. So like when the channels would go away, I would have, stuff to watch. And I remember like I was in like 5th grade, and me and my friend at the time, we'd watch DuckTales, and we would pause it, and then we would draw, and that's and see like who had the best drawing. So I always loved drawing. I loved animation, and then as I got older, I started getting more into film, and Star Wars was one that like just blew my mind. It was like, this is amazing. This is like the greatest thing ever. And during the family party, an uncle, he's like, hey, you like Star Wars, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, well, this is Neftali, and he worked on Star Wars. I'm like, worked on Star Wars? Like, people work on, like, this is man-made? Like, I just thought it was just, on TV. I had no idea how it was made.
Yeah, that you could actually get into the production and stuff like that.
So, at the time, he was working for Lucas, and he had just wrapped working on Captain EO for Disneyland. And we lived in Vallejo, and we moved to American Canyon, and it turned out that he lived a block away from us. So I was always over at his house, and he would show me all the artwork from Star Wars, all the models that he would create, because he was also a model maker. Some of them were actually used in Jedi.
I was going to ask, what stuff did he do specifically? Was he illustrator, but also...
He was a model maker, but he was also part of the computer division at Lucas.
Okay.
Yeah, but... so I was always over at his house and just trying to absorb as much as I could. And then after high school, I wanted to get into Academy of Art. I wanted to be a cinematographer, but it was just way too expensive. So I was like, you know what, I'll find my way in. So I started going to community college, and at the time I was working for an uncle of mine, just doing office work and delivering materials because he was a contractor. And it turns out that one of the jobs that he had was at Pixar, because now Neftali, who was at Lucasfilm, had left, and he had joined Pixar when Pixar formed. So it was right after Toy Story, and I was delivering materials to Pixar in Point Richmond. And my uncle was like, hey, they're looking for someone to work in the mailroom. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, you should apply, but you have to promise me that you're going to keep going to school. I'm like, yeah. So turns out that they had hired someone to work in the mailroom, and he called in sick his first day.
Ooh, that's never a good sign.
Yeah, so they're like, yeah, so they fired the guy, and they're like, let's keep looking. And I interviewed, and I got hired the next day, and I started at Pixar at 19.
Jeez.
So for the first couple of years, I would work at Pixar, and then I'd go to night school, College of Marin. I'm just trying to, keep my the promise that I made to my uncle to keep studying.
So what was that journey from the mailroom to actually getting into the creative side of things?
Yeah.
For me, it was being a part of the story department. After working in the mailroom, I got the opportunity to become a production assistant on Monsters, Inc. And I was working the desk, and I would get people's lunches, and I would do everything a PA would do. I would deliver, the producer would tell me to, hey, go pick up my laundry. So I'd go and pick up the laundry. Whatever it took, I did it. And while there, a friend of mine, I'm like, hey, I'm moving over to the editorial department. They're looking for someone to work in story. I was like, yeah, and I had no idea what story was. So I get in there, and next thing you know, I'm working on the storyboards. I'm working on scripts. They're flying me out to LA to the recording sessions, and I got to meet Billy Crystal, John Goodman, Jennifer Tilly, James Coburn. And I was like, this is what I want to do.
At what age is that at? Like,
I was probably 21, 22.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's just, first of all, a good story of like, work, right? Go to work, and if you're working in a place that you see a future at, you're going to find those opportunities, take those opportunities, and you're going to work your way up.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people just get stuck in this mentality of like, I'm just going to get a degree and I'll be a manager somewhere, and then that's it. And it's like, you gotta choose the location and the profession that you want to be in, and you gotta start at the bottom, learn it all.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I loved it. Like, basically, Pixar was my school. So I just try to learn as much as I could in story department. And then the great thing about Pixar is, like, after every film, they kind of place you in different departments. So I got to, I worked in the character department, the sets department. So I got to learn the whole pipeline of, from the inside and seeing how these movies are made and getting the opportunity to work with amazingly talented people.
Yeah.
So, I got to say, so there were two things. One was DuckTales. That was like, when they were doing reruns of that, I would watch that. I'd get up at like 6 a.m. every morning, and I'd watch DuckTales like for I don't know how many years. Like that was my way to wake up when I was a kid, and then I'd go to like zero period for band and whatever else and all that crap. So I did this like through like high school. I was kind of a nerd, but like I put the facade on that I wasn't when
We knew.
Yeah, I know you do. But then the VHS thing, you bring that up because I used to videotape or record also. And I think a lot of people, at least the younger people, like, I don't know, below 30 now, I don't even know if they know how to, like, rewind.
I don't even know if they know what a VHS player is.
No.
Oh, yeah.
I actually saw this little clip of college football players where they just walk up to them and they're like, what is this?
I did see that.
You saw that?
On TikTok.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious. I'm like, they're like, most of them are like, I don't know. Is this what film used to be? Like,
It's like a VHS.
It was just a VHS tape.
Oh yeah, it's
And-
like says "Be kind, rewind." They're
I think
like, "What? Why
even
you
one of
telling
them
me
was
this?"
like, "Is this a DVR?" You're like, "It's not. What the?
"Yeah."
That was a whole nother generation of technology."
Oh man.
Anyways.
that's wild. Yeah, I was gonna say for like two things for me was Monsters Inc. is actually my by far my favorite Pixar
Oh, wow, awesome.
movie.
It's a good
Very
one.
touchy story. Yeah. And two, like this is so solid because you've heard about this a lot. I feel like in the industry where it was just like they always took, starting in the mailroom. It's you kind of I feel like lived this story of like the working your way up from the ground to
Yeah.
the top. You know what I mean? Which we could get into with you guys with Big Grin Productions and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the great thing working about the mailroom is I got to know everybody in the studio. And at the time, Pixar was, 270 people? So it was a super small studio, so I kind of knew everybody. And then during lunch, I would have to cover for the front desk receptionist. So I would be at the front desk, greeting people.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, hey, Steve Jobs, how's it going? It's like, Steve Jobs.
Like I gave him coffee.
This is
And so it started. You said it when you were there. It was 260 people.
260, 270 people.
And at the end when
when I left,
You
it was
left,
about
it was-
1,300 people.
okay, and still in Point Ranch, or no, they moved. To
No, they
Emeryville.
moved to Emeryville.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, okay, we'll
Yeah.
get into the next step of the story, but we got to get Toby's side on how he got into this creative setting that he currently lives.
Adrian's story is so fun. My story, I grew up in Golden, Colorado, and from an early age, from what I'm told, I was just always drawing, and the Ninja Turtles is what got me into drawing back then, and it actually would get me into a lot of trouble in school. Like first, second grade, I was always, at a parent-teacher conference because I was constantly drawing on homework and drawing for friends and being like a distraction sometimes. So my parents were always kind of being pulled in, and I was being told to stop drawing. Like there's like no future there, so stop it. And then what I was trying to think if there was a Pixar movie or an animated movie that really inspired me for animation. I mean, I loved Finding Nemo back when that came out. That was in high school. But really, I would say, it was probably the Turtles that just kind of kept me going, and then that led into X-Men and things like that during the '90s. But yeah, I went to an art institute of Colorado. It was a not so great school in terms of what they were trying to do. They were just like shoveling anybody and anyone with a portfolio into the school. But there were a few excellent teachers that were there that were actually down to help out the students and things like that they kind of saw some promise in. And I quickly was a fish out of water at that school. I had never felt so disconnected or isolated at the school, just because in high school, I'd play sports. I was in the art crew. I had my own crew. I would like talk with everybody. So it didn't really matter if you're like a goth or jock or whatever, stereotype. I could hang out with anybody. But there I was just like, man, I don't understand these people wearing tails and ears.
Wait, about what year was this?
This was 2003.
And you guys already had tails and ears, people?
So I had no idea. I had no idea what
Furbies,
those.
or-
Yeah, the furries.
Furries.
That's
back in the day. Yeah,
okay, we're
yeah,
talking furries.
Well, that's what I
Yeah.
assume. I mean,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that was around. I didn't see that until like
Back then I
10
had no
years ago.
idea. I just
Yeah.
it was just like there was a big group of like kind of anime kids,
Oh.
small
Uh,
group of furries. Every floor was kind of dedicated to a different department. So there's a photography floor and videography and graphic design, but every kind of group or discipline all kept to themselves. And animation students were kind of labeled the weirdos to begin with. So I was like, oh, this is a really interesting dynamic at this school, and it was just a weird time to try, figure out who the hell I was in this college, and then trying to find friends and stuff like that. But slowly, I started to find other like-minded people that we enjoyed similar things and stuff like that.
well,
And then
in the creative space, there's so much diversity to
yeah,
what people's preferences are, but there's also a lot of acceptance to it, which I think is one of the great parts about it.
yeah,
We don't have that so much in the wine world, where it's kind of like everybody just thinks you got to go down this one lane. So I appreciate that diversity and acceptance that the art world has. Probably more entrenched than any other sort of career.
yeah. And I feel like it's only opened up and expanded ever since, like 2003. Seeing somebody with a tail or some ears was just like, oh, that's different. But now I think at a school or maybe even in a workplace or something like that, I think it would probably be acceptable and well, not acceptable, but like it would be accepted and people wouldn't really mind, as long
Yeah.
as you're a good person and you're not, being a dick to somebody and hurting somebody, like what's it matter?
Yeah. So I got to ask, with being in the animation department around 2003, because that was maybe just at the front end of everything going more digital.
Yeah.
But you started off, whatever you want to call it, longhand, like true old school illustrating. And
Yeah,
at what point did you
traditional.
at what point do you transition to digital, or did you start in Colorado in digital at the Art Institute?
No, I started traditional in Colorado. There was two guys that were a couple years ahead of me and a buddy. His name is Hobby, and we were kind of these two kindred spirits, and we also had this like natural competitive edge to each other where we would try and outdo each other with all of our assignments. And these two guys that were a couple years ahead of us had the same kind of edge, and one of them was like very 2D animation, hand drawn, pencil to paper, and the other guy was like all 3D. So we looked up to those guys, and I was like, I'm going to do everything 2D, pen to paper. I'm not even going to use a pencil because that's how good I'm going to get. And while in school, they were starting to introduce different programs, and one of them was Flash. And I was like, okay, this is cool to kind of do everything digitally, but it's still hand drawn. I loved and devoured learning Flash. And then I just had the hardest time converting and learning 3D. Started with maybe a little bit of Lightwave and 3ds Max, and then eventually, I think junior year, I started learning Maya, and it took me years and years to just get comfortable with 3D. But I will say the benefit of learning 3D for me was learning how to do everything across the board, from modeling, rigging, texturing, everything across, particles, effects, stuff like that, to learn how to do a little of everything. Then that kind of led into me being able to hire and work with people eventually, and understanding like what I'm asking of them, and knowing if they're trying to pull something over me as well.
Got it. All right. And then after college, then what was your first gig, your first career choice or move?
Yeah, right after college, so senior year, I got accepted into an animation program in France called Gobelin, and was like this 2-week boot camp summer program. That's where I essentially learned how to animate, and in those 2 weeks, I wish I had learned all that in 4 years. So I went there, came back, graduated. The following week, I started an online animation school called the Animation Mentor, and that was purely 3D animation. They did have a 2D track as well. So I was doing that. But when I graduated, already started my company, Big Grin. I started Big Grin in 2006. So I was already working for myself and working with a couple like small client projects at that time. And then fast forward to 2009, I was able to pick up some work at a video game company called NetDevil at the time, and we were working on Lego Universe. And this was right before Minecraft came out. So we were like really excited for players to, jump on the computer and work on building their worlds and, coming up with essentially like whatever was in their mind, and they could do that with Lego in 3D essentially on the program.
That's very cool. Well,
Yeah.
so, I am thinking about kind of like where, as Adrian said earlier, kind of like he didn't even know when he first like jumped into like, or having a desire to be in kind of arts and digital arts, and realizing that it could be a career. So then you brought up kind of like you already had established yourself as an independent operator. Were you like, how did that work? Because I think a lot of people don't understand the inner workings. I don't even understand them. Were you a subcontractor at times for like, did you get hired by certain companies to fill a certain role? Or how did that work?
Yeah. So when I started Big Grin, it was 2006. And at the time, the whole reason I started it was to work with Denver Metro schools and help accelerate the learning process. Back then, there was the No Child Left Behind bill with George Bush and all of that. And we just needed to like move the needle for education and math, reading and math for like 1%. If we could prove that we could improve children's learning just by 1%, it would be like a success. And my vision at the time was to go into the schools and utilize smartboard technology to have the kids in there, and especially English as second language schools, have them interact with an animated character on screen, get them up and kind of moving their physiology, because there's a higher learning retention that way, and then have the character on screen, like say ball, pelota, and like go through kind of the list with the kids, but actually interact. But back then, I think there was like only one or two companies that were starting stuff like that, so it was a little too ambitious. So I had to like pare that back to, again, pencil and paper for them. But that led to a commercial for doing something in Denver, and then that led to more freelance gigs, and I was kind of a hired gun, if you will, for different projects where I worked on a Discovery Channel project that aired on across the nation for the Lucy character, the oldest finding remains of a human skeletal like monkey essentially. So we did that, but I was like doing animation and mocap cleanup and also set dressing and texturing and things like that on that project. And then for the Lego company, I was an animator at that company full time. And then during the evening and in the morning, I would still work at Big Grin, just, kind of grinding and putting the hours in.
And like for Lego, you're talking like Ninjago.
Even before that, yeah.
Okay, even before that.
You're throwing out some.
Dude,
I know you watched all the movies. Like he wants to let you know. He's
bringing me back to like some of the early like animation stuff that Lego was doing, because it was really good. And then my kids got into it. And it was like they all. I mean, I was a Ninjago character for Halloween one of those years. Like,
it's pretty incredible. I don't know if you ever watched the film Grandma's Boy?
No.
Yeah.
You have? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, you know what's up there. My experience at this company was almost identical to Grandma's Boy. The team at Netflix, NetDevil had the world's second largest kind of bin of operation of Lego bricks in one facility outside of headquarters in Europe. But in the facility, people were riding around on scooters. We had like little motorcycles, and it was just bananas. There was a basketball court. There was like every game console. We had amazing Halloween parties and stuff like that. And part of the studio was set up for Lego, and then the other part of the studio was set up for two other games, internal games. And we even had like our own robot character who spoke like kind of a robot, but just very like heady, technical, wizard. It was amazing.
Dude, that's awesome.
I know, yeah. Hey, where was that at?
It was in Louisville, in Colorado.
Okay.
It's
That
sweet.
sounds pretty cool. It was like,
Yeah.
you know,
That's pretty awesome.
I'm
It,
kinda
it
just
was
like-
cool. And like during lunch, people would just go and like we were encouraged to go and work with Lego bricks all the time. So we could go to these aisles, it was like a shopping center essentially, but we go down all like I don't know, there's 9 aisles of these 6, 7 foot tall racks of all the Lego bricks you could ever imagine. And I remember for like employee of the month or whoever like the best employees that were just kicking ass, they would give away like the giant sets that were like, super expensive, like the Millennium Falcon or the Mars rover set and stuff like that. So there was tons of people that would just get the Millennium Falcon or Death Destroyer and things like that. So it was really cool.
I feel like that really improved the morale in the company. Like,
Oh yeah, people loved it. Some people would like sell their stuff on eBay or whatever, but people loved it.
I think we can incorporate that too, Joe.
I was like,
dude,
dude, we're not doing scooters
What?
at the winery.
I was
Yes.
we're just built with Lego building. You know,
It
what
was
I
a
mean? Like,
different. It was a different world, man. Now there's like liability around every corner. Thank you, government, and thank you, lawyers. You guys have done a phenomenal job of taking the fun out of everything in life.
The first time I ever visited Pixar, I had the feeling that this place was similar to the game company because people were riding around on scooters at Pixar as well. I don't even know if it's allowed, if people are allowed to really do that at Pixar, but I would see people like on roller skates and little scooters and things like that. And I was like, okay, this place is definitely like my vibe.
Yeah, we didn't have Legos, though.
Yeah.
when I was also
Angus
thinking
did.
that Toby,
Angus
you're
did,
like
yeah.
in LA right now, right?
I am, yeah.
Like I knew like living down there in LA, just speaking about scooters, I was there recently and I hope that it's kind of died down, this whole birds and they're still around. They're still like just being left on
Yeah,
people's yards and
there's
stuff like that. Is
these
there any,
bird-
like a scooter set?
Yeah, it's almost it's almost like a public art display of just additional garbage of crap on LA streets. There's not as many birds. There are some bird scooters, but mostly it's the lime,
The lime.
like the green ones.
Yeah.
And what drives me nuts, there's even somebody in our apartment unit here. Shout out to those assholes.
See, I like this. This is going good. Now we're going.
They leave the damn scooters. In the movies, normally I would never say that, but they leave the scooters right in front of the doorway. And there's people that are trying to get their baby carriages and stuff out the door, and it's like it blocks the damn door. And then somebody else leaves 2 scooters right in front of our garage. So there's many times where trying to go out through the garage, and I have to open it up, and I run out there and move the damn scooters off to the side, and it's like cool if you ride them, just be nice and respectable. Put the damn thing on the side and don't put it in somebody's path or driveway or just like, oh cool, I'm at my spot. I'm gonna literally stop right in front of the door and get out and go to enjoy my meal.
So they have like mandatory places in at least in Europe, like where you can get charged if you don't put it in the right location, and you have to take a picture of it. So their system, I think, is a little
like
better than
that.
ours.
Yeah.
And they're very like open about it. So there are no-go zones and there are the paths. So it's like people aren't just taking them and going wherever the hell they want. And then you got to park them in one of the designated locations. So they're all kind of like, in an area. It's tied to your phone, tied to your credit card, obviously. And so they'll charge you if you just ditch it
There
like
you
in a
go.
park. So then I did notice in New York, which we were there last week, and I was asking because last time I was there, like just about a year ago, there were a hell of a lot more of these scooters. Both the limes,
Yeah.
the birds, whatever else. And I barely saw any of them. This like all throughout Manhattan. And so asked about them at one point, and it was like, well, what is it that's driving the not the downfall, but the less use of these scooters. And it's a mix of this is what people think, the accessibility of electric vehicles now, where people are like, oh, I can just buy a bike and So the people that were locals using them don't need to use them as much anymore because you can find electric scooters and bikes for so cheap rather than having to pay on a regular basis. And then it sounds like the homeless people were a mess to them.
It's interesting seeing the homeless out here too. They're so innovative in the sense that I saw somebody like I, I don't know how they're unlocking these things and riding them around, but they're pulling like additional shopping carts and stuff with them.
Yeah.
And
Oh, wow.
it's like good on them for
Well,
figuring
these
it
guys
out.
are like homeless people are getting phones, they're getting some money from programs or whatever else, and so they have the ability to access these things. It's just almost like a nomadic way of life, but it's not like they're homeless and necessarily poor. It's just that they're roof challenged. They like to be outdoors.
Well, I remember when I was like, 'cause I was in New York probably like around 2016, 2017, and they had just started these free internet stations in Manhattan, just like on the street, and you could like charge your phone, and it was just kind of this thing.
Such a bad idea.
It was a bad idea because again, like, and it's not. I mean, it was just some people would take advantage of the system of being homeless, and they would kind of set up their shop, dude. They would have like a chair, have some boxes for like a desk. They just like plug in like it was like you rolled up on their office. And then also there was a problem that like there was a lot of porn being like accessed. So then you're just like walking on the street being like, it's so great. They gave us like free internet and places to charge your phone, but
Maybe like when you have a good idea like that, don't take it to New York City. Like pilot it somewhere else. Yeah.
But we digress. Told you we would go on some fun little tangents. I would like to get into how you guys, because you guys both have great stories, and how you guys came together.
So I'll fast forward that story a little bit. So around 2011, I was laid off from the Lego company along with half the team, which is kind of a blessing in disguise because I was not having as much fun animating on the computer as I thought I would. I just kind of missed doing things by drawing by hand and stuff like that. So I started to slowly transition into storyboarding. And there, you're kind of wearing multiple hats to begin with, thinking about cinematography and acting, and you still have like keyframe poses to draw out and stuff like that. So I loved it. And things with my company had kind of imploded, and I was working with this producer who turned out to be doing some scandalous stuff on the side with the money that she was raising for our projects. And unfortunately, she passed away. So I was like, you know what, the hell with all this. I'm going to move to San Francisco and pursue my dream of going and working at Pixar. So 2011, during the summer, I just packed my stuff, went couch surfing for a couple months, and eventually landed in a spot in in San Francisco and then North Berkeley. And then I was accepted into this program, literally right across the street from Pixar, started by Pixar artists, called the Animation Collaborative. And I was, accepted into a storyboarding class and a life drawing class. And I just kind of stuck with those two classes for almost 9 months, just to kind of get as many reps in as possible. And it was during that time I was like, oh my God, I love this, because I was like one of the worst artists in kind of the group, in the sense that they were very selective. I think there's only 10 artists per class that they would select, but the talent level of everybody in these classes was so damn high that it just kind of, you either sink or swim, and it kind of forced me to kind of raise my skill set. And when I moved there, I had no money, I had no job lined up, and I didn't know anybody. But I just had this crazy determination that I would rather die there than going back home to Colorado. And I would do whatever it took to get into Pixar. And that was kind of my mantra. I put like stuff up on a vision board, and it's like, I'll be in Pixar within 6 weeks. Okay, 6 months. Okay, 1 year or whatever, right? And because I didn't know anybody, I started creating these sketch crawl kind of meetup sessions, if you will. And it started from a lot of the students that were at this collaborative. And then it slowly started growing and growing, and to the point where some of our sketch meetups would be like hundreds of people from the Bay Area. And what kind of made my thing unique was we wouldn't like, traditional sketch crawl is like you start at one location and you go to many locations and draw along the way. I would just find a park, invite people, hang out. We draw whatever we see. People can network, chit chat, and then we would go and watch a movie related to the industry. So typically it was animated or heavy with VFX. And then afterwards, we would go to the bar and grab some drinks and food, and then analyze or critique the film and stuff like that. And from that, it grew and grew up to about 700 members.
Wow.
Damn.
But because of that, I got to meet different people, and I found my way into a gaming startup company. Shout out to Mitra. And she's like, hey, what the hell do you do? And she's like, do you want to do this thing? And I'm like, oh, it sounds all right. Like, I could do that for a minute, and then I'll be over at Pixar. But that thing I was going to do for like a minute turned into over 5.5 years being with that startup company. And I quickly kind of reassessed what I thought it was about Pixar that I really was kind of jonesing for in that sense, and then realizing that I had this great opportunity with this game startup, even though it wasn't in the exact lane that I wanted to go down. But I could learn from the CEO, I could learn from the creative director, I could learn from the product managers, and then treat the company as it was my own and help grow it. So I was the 17th employee in the Bay Area. By the time I left, there was 250 employees. 22% of the work staff, like the force, was hired directly from me. And I kind of, again, climbed the ranks from just being this pixel wrangler, pixel monkey pusher to being a creative director.
So what games did you work on, or what were some of the projects, just to give people reference?
So there were a lot of mobile games. So there's probably 50 plus casual mobile casino type games, but the ones that stood out the most, and this is where Adrian comes in, I had pitched Shaquille O'Neal a couple game ideas, and that story's kind of crazy to begin with, but I pitched Shaquille O'Neal, the company kind of locked up and secured that deal with Shaq and his team. So then I became kind of the creative lead for the Shaq games, and I needed a producer because we were growing so much. We didn't have a producer that could help me out, and I was like, well, I just happen to know one. And then Adrian joined me and was my producer on the Shaq games, and that was his very first kind of in to the studio, and then also for us working together.
Okay.
That was 10 years ago.
Okay, wait,
Damn. That's crazy.
I want to get more in on this experience with Shaq, because I mean, I heard you guys played some b-ball against Shaq.
Oh yeah.
I mean, do we want? I mean, do we
You guys have to get on each other's shoulders, or what? How'd that work out?
Yeah, we actually. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah. So when I left Pixar, again, our friend Danny and Louie, they're like, hey, Toby, he's at a game studio. He's looking for a producer. So I went and I applied and I interviewed and I got the job. And again, it's like trying to transition the skills that I learned at Pixar now is to mobile games. And there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences. So it took me a while to kind of get up to speed. But the first project was a game with Shaq. And Toby, man, like, this guy was just like drawing 24/7, creating all these crazy assets. And what I loved about the company, though, even though we were making mobile games, a lot of the artwork was original, which was awesome because it wasn't like the clip art stuff that, let's just, get this generic looking artwork and put a game together. Like,
Yeah.
We hired some amazing artists that have gone on and now, like, Mitra's at Pixar and our friend Carlos is at Warner Brothers, and like all these artists just went on to do really awesome things.
Big things.
Yeah, big things. But going back to Shaq's, yeah. So while we were pitching the game, we were kind of giving him updates. So he's like, "Hey, you guys should come out to Florida to my house." So it was Toby, myself, our creative director, and one of the other producers, and we flew out to Florida to pitch him. This is what we're thinking. This is the artwork, and we went to his house, and he's showing us around. And he had at the time he had his own basketball court, so we started playing.
Probably a pretty quaint place. Was it on Cribs?
Yeah, it was on MTV Cribs.
It was.
It was.
He had just got the fish tank.
So did he actually came and played with you guys?
So we went out to pitch, just like Adrian was sharing, and what, unbeknownst to anybody, I don't even think I told Adrian. Like I grew up loving basketball. Like my first dream originally was to go play in the NBA, even though I was a bit of a short guy. You know, I did my damnedest to try and be able to dunk during high school and stuff like that, and I was pretty close. But I always had a vision like, okay, this is how I'm going to get to the NBA, and then that vision quickly and dream quickly went away. And so when we had the opportunity to go to Shaq's house, I was like, oh shit, this is gonna be the opportunity where I can, you know, play Shaq on his home court. And I had started a basketball team at the game company. So we had our own jerseys and stuff like that. And underneath kind of my suit, if you will, I had my jersey top on. And as he's giving us the tour, I knew where the basketball court was because of the MTV Cribs episode. And I was like,
he did his research.
I was like, Shaq, can you take us down to the gym? Because through the gym, you got to the basketball court, but in the gym, he had all of the memorabilia, you know, like Larry Bird's jersey and Jordan, all this kind of stuff. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I'll take you through. So we're going through there, and he's like, oh, yeah, and here's the gym. And I was like, cool. And he walks everybody out, and I was like, oh, I need to use the restroom. He's like, oh, it's right there. So they're all in the gym. I go to the restroom, and I take off my shirt, and I've got my jersey on, and I come out, and I grab a basketball, and Shaq's like, oh, bet, like, let's go.
Is this really the end? Unbelievable. Find out next week.